So it's 3 o'clock and time to start the live stream. I hope everything is working, and feel free to say so in the chat and point out any problems during the stream if you find them. There is a little bit of a lag, I think, but I will try to refocus when you ask questions or point to problems. Cool. Great. Maybe I should get a professional mic or something instead of this quite bad headset. It's deteriorated rapidly in the batteries, so I hope it will suffice. So, not a professional YouTuber, streaming from home also, so unexpected things might happen. But I'm thinking about keeping this quite informal and a little bit relaxed. So I hope you have some coffee or a beverage of your choice, and let's get started. First week of the course has started and ended. I'm happy with the course start this year. We're a whopping bunch of students. I think it's like 250 students this year, and that's probably a record. But everything seems to be working quite smoothly, and you are doing a great job in Slack and in the tutoring meetings and stuff like that. So I hope everyone is up to a good start because next week is the first deadline already. So let's take a look at the course homepage, because a little bit of stuff has well, maybe not changed, but been added. Maybe the most important thing that has been added is the clarification about what's to be handed in for the first workshop. For some reason, the workshop number 2 was quite detailed regarding that, and there was some questions and confusion about that. But I've written this down now, so it should be clear. So for the peer review, you should zip your stuff, and the stuff you should zip is at least a domain model in the form of a UML class diagram, and this optional README explaining any assumptions, changes, or clarifications to the requirements that you make during modeling. So it's not that advanced. So basically an image in some common format with boxes and lines between the boxes and good names for the associations and good names for the classes and multiplicities. That's about it. For the final hand-in, you of course refine your model after feedback and make a new one, but you also include the old one. So you have 2 domain models, so to speak, the one you sent in for the peer review and also the refined one where you have incorporated some changes maybe. And you also hand in a text file with the changes you made or not made. So maybe you get a suggestion to do some change, but you do not agree to that. So I think you should motivate why you did not agree to the feedback you got, and also motivate why you agreed to the feedback you got and maybe did the changes. You have this optional README again explaining your assumptions, and also if you work in a group, add the group members with the first name, last name, and the username. So the first question in the chat: what progress would you expect that students have made so far? So I definitely think that you should have watched the first 2 lectures. More specifically, most importantly, is maybe to look at the domain modeling lecture so that you know what the domain model is, and you basically should have started working on the domain model and the first workshop, I think. That's the progress I think would be good to be at. So a little bit more of a clarification about exactly what you should hand in, and I think it's pretty clear now. Everything can of course be improved, and if you think you find something that's wonky, post it in Slack and I will take a look at it ASAP. All right, tutoring. We have a number of new tutoring slots available next week. Quite a lot of them actually so far, at least, with me or Jacob. So there's ample opportunities to get a tutoring slot if you would like us to check your models, or you have some questions regarding domain modeling, or something else also, of course. So don't hesitate to book a meeting, and see you in Slack for that. I think the little thread that Jacob started with the where you say post your tutoring time worked really great. I don't know why I haven't thought about that before, but that worked fine, and it was quite efficient to call you. Otherwise, I need to look up all the students and try to find you in Slack, and that's not always easy. So I think we will stick to that approach. I think also there are some slots available on Saturday in this week if you want to have some tutoring on Saturday. Yeah, three slots available at least. So let Osama work also. I think it's good to have tutoring available at a little bit of different times, and it's nice to for some people work full-time jobs almost reading this education, so it can be nice for them to be able to book tutoring on non-working hours, so to speak. I'm usually just doing tutoring on the working hours, but I'm quite often answer questions in Slack during the off hours also. So don't hesitate to just ask a question in Slack, and I will answer it as soon as possible. It's always better if you ask questions in the main channel. Faster answers, and also knowledge is spread to more people. It's if you are asking a question, it's often many that have the same question, so it will save time for everyone, I think. And also it contributes to a nice flow of things that happen in the Slack channel. So don't hesitate to do that. All right, the next maybe item on the news, what's happened on the course homepage, is that we have now added the link for the peer review system for the first workshop. You find it under deadlines. You click it, and then you need to log into CoursePress. So you log in with your usual username and password, and then you will get a personal link to the peer review system, and you click that one and you get a page that looks something like this, and you choose the file that you would like to upload, and then you upload it clicking this button, and then you can also download your uploaded file if you want to check what's actually uploaded. And you can upload multiple times until the next phase for the peer review starts. So when the review the review phase starts September 10, 11:59, then all of the uploads are locked and you can start reviewing. So that's what will happen next in the first workshop, and then you will spend some time reviewing, and there will be instructions for how you do that also. All right, I hope everything regarding this will work finally. If you cannot access this page, I need to know that as soon as possible. because then you are, for some reason, your username has not been fed over to this system correctly. There's quite a lot of manual work there, so it's easy to make mistakes. All righty then. Next thing is the next part of the crash courses has been added. The software architecture one. I think this one is quite good to take a look at for the second workshop, because there we kind of like start with this architectural principle of view model separation. So you need to understand view model separation really before you can start designing your software and implementing it. All right, I think that's it. Of course, the form for registering, if you have registration problems, has been closed, and I've sent everyone that needed to be approved for registering for the course. So you should be able to do that if you have not done it before, and you need to do that yourself. So you register for the course. I just remove the hindrance for you registering. So that's something that you should do, and I think you need to do that before Sunday for everything to work correctly. All right, I think that's the main part of things that's happened during the week, and I think, as I said, the start has worked really well, and there has actually not been too many problematic registrations and such things to deal with, and that's always nice to not need to spend too much time on administrative stuff. So let's move to a little bit of the questions. So I posted this little thread here on Slack with some questions, and there were some interesting ones, I think. So one question was about what does domain modeling really mean. In the book, he talks about defining use cases, defining the domain model, assigning object responsibilities, draw interaction diagrams, and design class diagrams. And should you do everything for this first workshop, or is it just the middle part? And the short answer is the middle part. Okay, some questions has come in here, so let's see. So I think there's some tutoring sessions on Saturday, so you can book those if you want to. For the high grades, we should first submit the requirements for the pass grade. Yes. The whole peer review process and the first hand-in is just for the passing grades. So stick to that, and then you can do the higher grades if and when you feel you have the time to do so. So, and that you have the whole course, you send those in at the end. All right. So, well, the fast answer to that question is you only do the domain model. You have the requirements. Because to create a domain model you need something to work with, right? And we have this problem area of the boat club, and you have a few requirements that kind of like delimit what you are supposed to do. So for example, I've during tutoring, some people started on the payment system, and the payment system is really for the higher grades. There is really nothing in the requirements for the passing grade concerning anything about the payment system and stuff like that. Is it better to wait for grade 2 feedback before start working on grade 3? Well, hopefully you can wait for your grades. I really hope that we will be able to give you feedback as soon as possible. But as I said, there's 250 students on the course, so there is a risk that time will slide on for a little bit. So it could be a good idea to at least start working on it. Hopefully your first attempt is not totally whacked, and it shouldn't be too hard to make some changes if you need to. So hopefully you will get feedback soon, but as always, it's better to be safe than sorry, and I would probably start on higher grades, at least the third one, the grade 3, as quite soon. And also it's a little bit, we do the domain modeling now. It's nice to have it done maybe before then we kind of like leave it in the course and focus more on design. So it could be nice also to maybe not have to do it in a couple of weeks when you are fully in a design thinking instead of analysis thinking. And that's one of maybe the hard things actually in this course, and with the domain modeling specifically, that it's very easy to think like a developer, think about software and worry about, oh, how should this be implemented? And we need to try to let go of that when we do domain modeling, and really just try to understand the requirements better and think about what information is needed, and not to think about how will this information be provided, how will it be stored, how will this work. Now we can just be in blissful ignorance regarding these technical details. The first model you make in your dice game, is that just a sketch to make a more formal class diagram? First of all, I think the first kind of like introduction there, that's it's not a very good model actually. It's more or less just driven by the audience and to get something going. But as such, I think sketches are fine to have as domain models. So domain modeling is not very formal, really. But sure, if you do kind of like sketch diagrams, it's often nice if you can at least read what you have been writing and things like that. So I would not discourage you from using just pen and paper. In many cases, the tools that people want to use are hindering you in your modeling. You worry more about getting that line to connect correctly to the box than doing the actual modeling. You should put the group members in a text file, a readme.txt. So, all right, let's continue with the questions from Slack here. So, when, and where do you actually do things? And that's a good question. So, to be able to do domain modeling, we need some requirements, right? And in the task, you get some requirements and a problem area. And then we can do some analysis and try to understand and improve these requirements. That's basically the most important part about almost any of the modeling that we do. It's not the final diagram that's really important. In reality, it's doing the modeling. So doing the modeling is the most important part. So in domain modeling, we try to improve and understand the requirements, and we will use the domain model later on also, maybe as an inspiration for classes in the design and classes in a database and things like that, or tables in a database and things like that. But you should maybe not yeah, you should not overthink it too much. I think it's some of the mistakes I've seen is adding too much to the domain model and seeing the domain model as something that you should be able to look at and understand all of the requirements. And that's not really the case that you will be able to do that, because the requirements focus on the dynamic part of things, the rules of the system, the business rules, the rules for who can do what things and things like that. And the domain model's work is just to look at the information that is needed so that the requirements can be executed, so to speak. And as I said, then we start with the design. And actually, I think design work is probably started before requirements, or before the domain model is finished, so to speak. It will probably never be finished. But you make decisions, design decisions, really early in projects often. You decide on things at an architectural level. You decide, for example, what platform should we support? What language should we develop in? Should we have any special process that we should follow and things like that? So you decide a lot of things even before you know everything about the requirements, of course. And the design, more low-level design work can start when we have a basic understanding about some of the requirements, some of the domain model, and then we can start with the design and implementation and testing and deployment of the system. I think this image here, it's from Unified Process Wikipedia page. So it explains quite nicely the focus in different parts of the project. So vertically here we have the time. So time flows from left to right, and at a certain point in time, for example, towards the end here, you can see that it's not that much requirement work. It's not that much analysis and design work. Maybe just updating things that we would like to have for future maintenance of the system. It's a little bit more of implementation work, a little bit of testing work. I would probably think that there will be a ramp up of testing, a little bit here towards the end. But anyway, and a lot of deployment, because the system is maybe nearing completion at least. At the opposite, in the beginning, there is a lot of requirements work, a lot of analysis and design work, a little bit of implementation work, a little bit of testing. Because the system is not that large, there is not that much to test. Rather, you maybe spend your time figuring out strategies for testing and things like that. And it's of course not that much to deploy either. But you do everything more or less every iteration, and the length of an iteration is something that you can decide upon yourself. And it's almost like this structure is also repeated at a microscopic level for a developer. So you come to work and you need to know what to do. Okay, I'm supposed to implement this feature. Then you work with the requirements. You try to understand what it is you are supposed to do. You look maybe at the domain model, you look at the requirements, and you try to understand. Then when you know what you're supposed to do, you need to know how you're supposed to do it. Then maybe you look at the design. So I'm supposed to add this feature, where how should I incorporate that into the system so that it works smoothly for everyone. So when you know that how to do things, you can do them, and then of course you need to test, and then you deploy your stuff at the end of the day. La 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 la. Okay, some more questions from the chat here. During that example, I'm thinking you mean the dice game, which was great, by the way. Yeah, cool. You use the verbs to describe the relationship between the boxes conceptual class, but if we do a UML class diagram, we don't use that annotation, do we? Basically, you do. So in the domain model, we do a certain type of class diagram notation. It's a very basic one. So basically we just have the classes with some attributes, maybe no operations. We have associations between the classes, and the associations have an association name that can be inspired, for example, by looking at verbs in requirements or problem descriptions and things like that. I would probably advise you not to go overboard, and sometimes you kind of like need to think a little bit more than just mechanically putting down every noun as a class and every verb as an association. So while that could be a good start, you often need to prune and think a little bit more. There is one more thing you can do, and that's having inheritance or generalization, specialization. But that's a little bit more advanced, so we don't really need to discuss that right now. Yeah, there's a lot of attributes mentioned in the requirements. I think you don't need to list everything. Basically, I'm more interested in classes and their relations than having 1,000 attributes for the classes. If you have a lot of attributes, it's probably better to describe that in a data dictionary. So you can define that a member has a first name, a last name, and you can probably come up with 1,000 different attributes that could be good to have. So if you do a class diagram like that, it will probably just be 2 classes on a screen, and that's what you will fit. So don't go overboard. You can add 1 or 2 maybe per class if it's if you find something that would be interesting or important. I think that could be the limiting factor there. So as with everything, especially the domain modeling is hard because it's a little bit this fluffy model, you think, and it's not really that formal, and it's not really translatable into source code. Many of you will probably find that design is easier because that has a concrete translation into the actual source code. Right now it's a little bit loosey-goosey, and everything can be correct more or less, you think. I think you should use that carefully, and every time you add something to a domain model, you make it a little bit more complicated to understand. So you should always be a little bit, is this really needed? That's the question you should ask yourself. Does it add to the understanding of the model, or does it just add complexity? Is it better that this is shown in the requirements, the use cases, or whatever kind of requirements you have? Or is it really something that we need to show in the domain model? That's always a question you should ask yourself. Are you adding to the understandability of the model? Can you create multiple domain diagrams, one for members, one for the secretary, and one for the treasurer? I would probably not recommend this in this workshop, at least. The model should be small enough so it should be easy to fit on screen anyway. If you have a really big model, then it can be okay to do so. You lose a little bit of this visual understanding by splitting a model. So you really don't see the whole, but you need to look at the parts and then make this puzzle in your brain instead of having it on screen. I would be hesitant to split a domain into several diagrams. Then again, sometimes you have different domains in the same problem. So you have, or in the same system. So you have a system that consists of several different domains. So maybe in an e-commerce system we have this web shop domain, and that's one domain, and then we maybe have inventory management, and that's maybe another domain. They are maybe connected in some parts, but they're probably quite separate also in different problem areas, and then it could be a good idea to have them separate. And that could also be an idea because domain models can be reused. So if you separate them into nice distinct problem areas, then you can take this and reuse it in another project. Maybe you're doing some inventory related things in another project, and you can just reuse the domain model you used in your e-commerce system. So then it's a good idea to have them a little bit more separate. So can't we just make a single conceptual class for person/member/account and then check for privilege for specific tasks? I would ask myself the question, is authentication and stuff like that connected to both clubs? Are these the same domain, or are they separate domains? You could even probably argue that authentication is quite it's a problem we get because we need to do this as a software system, right? We decide that this is supposed to be a software system, and then we need authentication. So in addition, I think also that authentication systems or things like this is, well, it's pretty standardized, and you will probably not implement anything regarding that yourself. I would reuse some stuff for authentication. So I would be a little bit hesitant on going at least overboard with the authentication part for this workshop, because it's not really connected to both clubs at all. It's more of a software problem that we get because we need to make this into a software system. So you can think a little bit about that. All right. The next interesting question I think I found here in the chat was about object diagrams. So in the domain modeling example, I draw a model of the course administration. I don't know how many of you have looked at that. It's kind of like the final video on that part. It's a little bit of a larger example. So you can take a look at that if you want a little bit more information regarding this. But the question is, we do class diagrams in domain modeling, and but there I also do an object diagram to try to explain the model better. And the question is if you can do that too. Of course you can do that too. There's nothing hindering you as long as you also have the class diagram. But maybe we should take a look a little bit more about what an object diagram actually is. So I made this quick little model here, and it's basically taken from that example that you have on the lectures page. And let's see if I can maybe have my little pointer thingy. So this is the class diagram. It describes the classes that we have, and this is some kind of a course administration system, and we have students and we have tasks, and students are connected to course to tasks because in a course you need to fulfill a certain tasks to get a result. So as a student, you do things, you do tasks, and you get the result on the task, and the result has a grade from A to F usually. And interestingly enough, a task can have subtasks, and this is this kind of like recursive association. It looks quite easy in the class diagram, but it's a powerful, really powerful tool where you can build advanced hierarchies of objects. And this also touches on an interesting thing, is that neither in reality nor in your software system classes really exist. except if you do some really weird reflection things, but let's leave that aside for now. So the classes is just the template from which you can create or describe an object. So in reality, we only have objects. In the executing software system, you only have objects. Classes are just the template for the objects that you create, and then the objects interact according to the associations, for example. So this means that an object diagram shows how the objects are arranged at a certain point in time. So, for example, I maybe have defined this course, 1DV607, the tasks of this course. And at the top, we have the full course task. So you will get a grade for the final grade for the course is more or less represented by this top task object. And we give the object a name. We can give it any name. And then we show that it is of type task. And since we have this recursive association here, the self-association, this root task can be connected to subtasks. And you have the subtasks online test and workshop 1 task. And probably more, but I ran out of screen space. So that's it for now. And the workshop 1 task consists of 3 subtasks. You have the peer review task, you have the final hand-in task, and you have the higher grade hand-in task also. And that one is, as you know, optional. So using the object diagram, you can explain how the objects will be arranged at a certain point in time. So this is after I've added all of the tasks for the 1DV607 course. At another point in time, maybe we have a student. It's the bad student, and the bad student has a result. You can note that this object is actually anonymous. It does not have a name. It just is an object of type result. The grade is unfortunately F, and it was for the peer review task that this bad student failed. So this again shows a snapshot of the objects and how they are arranged in a point in time. And this is something that maybe can explain a certain aspect of the class diagram. And you can, for example, you can take the domain model and you can take a requirement or a scenario in a use case or something like that, and you can say, well, this user now has done, he has added 4, how many tasks do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 tasks, and arranged them like this. And using this requirement, this domain model, the objects will be arranged in this way. So you can kind of like test drive your domain model and test drive your requirements and see how the objects will be arranged at that particular point in time. So it's an interesting tool. You can. The downside is, of course, that they tend to be quite big, and you only show this specific time. So if you have maybe a really advanced structure, it could be a good idea to try it out and see how things would work using an object diagram. They are not that common if you just take a look at some random UML diagrams. They are interesting, and I think they can give a deeper understanding. And it is this interesting concept that classes do not really exist, but it's when we run the system, it's only objects. When we look at reality, it's actually objects that we abstract into these classes, and we abstract the relationships into these associations. And sometimes you find something that is a little bit odd. For example, when I think about this, I would probably not say that every grade is A to F here, because on the online test you get pass fail, The peer review is also more pass-fail. These are graded like this is also maybe a 0 or a 1 or a 2 in a grade, and this is 3 or 4 in a grade, and this top one is A to F. So looking at this model, I would probably expand this grade attribute here into a class of its own, and maybe it has subclasses and things like that. So again, using an object diagram to analyze your class diagram and your requirements and see what happens here can give you further questions and further ideas on how your model should be changed or upgraded, and what works well, what does not work well. And object diagrams you can also do for design level diagrams later on if you want to. And we will actually do one kind of an object diagram, and that's the sequence diagrams that also work with objects, because it shows the objects executing something. Can you have several association names on one line instead of having several lines with one association name between the two classes? I would be a little bit hesitant. I would probably prefer to have 2 lines. Maybe just because it's easier to misunderstand. But of course, if you have 1,000 lines, then that will not be good either. So I think we can be quite flexible in the notation there. Again, the main thing is that in reality, the main thing is that you can understand. And if you do something that's good for the diagram but not maybe fully 100% UML notation correct, then you can always add a little note or something in the diagram telling how this should be interpreted. Maybe this is one of those instances. So I will just go through this list and answer some questions real quick. In the requirements for workshop 1, there was a secretary and member that had different requirements and use cases. In workshop 2, this is not specified. So I'm wondering if it's only one actor that should have access to both create, delete, etc. all members, and register delete both for a member. Basically, yes. You can think about workshop 2 as a single user system. So I'm thinking that at the boat club they will have a computer, and the administrator there at the boat club will have access to this computer. So you don't need to think about access roles or anything like that for the passing grade for workshop 2. Yeah, could you make it a little bit clearer on when to use a description class and when to use attributes? That's a good question. I think basically the idea of description classes is that sometimes we would like to have a description of something, and many instances will share the same description. So we can for example, let's imagine a car, and a car has a lot of attributes. So let's say we have the color of a car, we have a description of the model, we have a name of the model, we have what else could we have for a car? A number of attributes. And you can probably imagine that we can have a lot of cars of the same model that would have the same model name and then would also have the same model description. So if we find such a situation, then it could be a good idea to break out the description of the car and have what's common for a lot of cars in this description. So probably the model name and the model description then. And the color is on the other side individual for each instance. So that's a little bit on how you can think about description classes. Personally, I'm not too fond of them. I think the motivation it gives in the book, that it's kind of like this shared information thing. I don't think you need to worry that much about things like that in the domain model. And while there is kind of like a use for it, I also think it's maybe a little bit overused and not really needed. And it's this question again, if adding this description class and adding an association adds complexity, probably more complexity than adding a couple of attributes, and does not really contribute maybe that much to the description or to the diagram. So I'm a little bit hesitant to adding too many description classes. I could, for example, find it motivated if you, for example, would like to be able to change the model description of a car, and you really need to make sure that the model description then is updated for every instance. So if they share this description instance, then that's not a problem. If you have the model and model description in every car instance, then you would need to update every car instance. And yeah, things like that is maybe then it becomes clearer and more motivated to actually have a description class. Then again, I think this is the borderlines a little bit of design and optimization thinking also, so maybe it's not super duper. Do we display conditions such as the boat registration can't be during off-season in our diagram, or do we have that out since it's in the requirements? That's an interesting question. Conditions and rules and things like that are often super hard to display in the domain model. Maybe we can display that there are rules, but we cannot really make anything complex rule-wise in the domain model. The domain model is a static model, so it basically is not made for that. If you want to show things like that visually, you will probably do an activity diagram or maybe a state machine or something like this. As it is now, I think these text descriptions of rules in the requirements are good at showing and describing the rules. The domain model task is to provide the information needed so that the rule can be executed. So you need to think about, okay, we have this rule, what information is needed so that this rule can work, so that we can know how to solve this, the implementation and design of this rule. There, some information is probably needed. We need to make sure that the domain model provides that information. All right, I think I've covered most of the questions that I've got so far. Keep it up. I will post a similar thread for next week, and you're allowed to post in it whatever questions you would like me to elaborate a little bit on. So for next week, there's play. For next week, we have the submission to peer review system, September 10. Feel free to submit a little bit before, so not everyone submits in the last minute. And especially make sure that you can access the peer review system. It's not nice to find out that in September 10 at after 10 o'clock then, because then it's probably no one there that can fix it for you. So check that you can access the system. If you work in a group, it's super important that you all upload the exact same zip file. But that's said and written down in many locations. So I hope you don't miss that. All right. I don't think I have much more to say, really. I think, as I said before, it's been a nice course start. I hope that we will continue in a good pace. I hope that there will be some of you at least that enjoy peer reviewing. Peer reviewing is not an easy task, and please do it thoroughly and give your peers good feedback, and hopefully you will get good feedback back also. I think it's a good learning opportunity also to look at several models that try to solve the same problem and find out what you think is good and bad about them and try to build your arguments for that. It's a good exercise. And well, peer reviewing is part of being a student. There will probably be more and more peer reviewing as you go along in your education. Looking at other people's work and critiquing both the good and the bad, and motivating your stance on things is a good thing. It makes you grow both as a giver and receiver of feedback. When you get your feedback, feel free also to discuss it with in tutoring sessions. Can the README also include instructions on how to read and understand your diagram? Sure. Anything that can help the reader or viewer of the diagram understand it is of course good. Then you should of course be open to critique, and maybe there is a standard way of showing the things that you have done something special about, and a better solution that the reviewer will point out to you. The good thing about UML is that it's a language that in some way is at least understood by most developers to some degree, at least. At its easiest, it's boxes and lines, right? Maybe arrows, and it's not super hard. There are things about UML that can be complicated and complex, but at least in this course, it's not many things that you need to be able to do. It's kind of like 4 relationships that you need to remember when doing design, for example. So it's not an overwhelming task, I think. All right. Feel free to ask questions in Slack. I will answer them as soon as I can. And I hope you all will have a super nice weekend. I think it has been a little bit tiresome. After my first larger session of tutoring, I was actually quite tired. But it's quite common to feel like that in the beginning of a course. You kind of like need to get into it. So I'm guessing this recording will be available on YouTube automatically, and everything will work nicely. And I think it was a good format to do things in also. And I appreciate that you took the time to view it live. It's always a little bit more interesting. But I hope you have a nice weekend for now, and I will end the stream. See you in Slack.